I brought Jonathan for an extra lesson assessment. Basically, I think it was perfect timing. I was not coping with him and his behaviour. He just wasn't coping in the morning. He would have massive tantrums every morning. He couldn't get himself ready. He couldn't follow a routine. He would just lose it every morning. After school, we would get, especially at the beginning of each term, we would just have dynamite after the first few days at school. He was just so worn out mentally, and it just was playing havoc with the family and with my emotions too, really, trying to cope with this little child who, you know, we wanted him to have a good life and I didn't know how to help him. The teacher had told me that he just wasn't keeping up and he would go off onto his own little world, and he would lose touch with what was happening in the classroom. The extra lesson assessment, it was like a huge breakthrough. I just felt that all the doors that were shut were open at last, and yeah, it was just wonderful. The report was amazing, and it just put everything into perspective about why this child was having all these problems. He didn't need to go on Ritalin. There was nothing wrong with him really, except that his development was a bit delayed. The main thing that I noticed was that helped him with the extra lesson program was the morning times. It was having a calmer household and having a child who could just complete his little tasks, being able to get up and follow a process to get ready for school and just be a normal happy kid in the morning rather than just bombing out every day. His spelling and reading improved. He was behind in his you know, his tests at school, but that improved by well over 1.5 years in his chronological age, and his interpretation of what he was reading jumped right up by about 2 years. At the parent-teacher interview at the end of last year, the teacher said he was one of his top students and he got the award for academic achievement at the end of last year. He won the Year 7 Speech Shield for the school and then went on to the Tall Poppy speech competition and came second in that. Jonathan's relationships with his brothers have improved hugely. The anxiety levels have gone down. He's a lot more confident. I would heartily recommend it to all families with children with learning problems and behavioural problems.
Hawani was a really, I suppose, joyful, social, small boy. He was really curious and interested and really fascinated in the world. And then he hit school, you know, and it was this total change. And instead of learning being fun and joyful, he was just so unenthusiastic and listless. He'd cry every day when he went to school. And then when he came back at the beginning of his second year, they retested him and he'd forgotten everything. And so they said, oh, we want to put him in a special class. And he knew he hadn't done well too, and that's the worst. And he was a small boy who really, really tried. And he kept saying, Mum, I'm trying so hard. He said, but I get told off every day and I can't stay still, and it was just really depressing for him. He was behind his age in reading, writing and spelling. He couldn't transition, so you'd take him to school and he'd be upset going to school, and then you'd try and take him home at the end, he'd be upset at the other end as well. Then he'd get home and he'd have a meltdown because it took all his energy just to be able to sit still. And socially he was starting to have problems because he was so frustrated. He'd act out or he'd withdraw into his own dreamy little world. We came in for the extra lesson assessment. It was really fascinating because Hawani just was joyful about the whole thing, you know. It was the first time I'd seen him joyful about learning in 2 years. When we got the results, it was interesting because you could see all the pieces in a row that, you know, why it was hard for him and why school hadn't been working for him. The extra lesson home program involves about 15 minutes of exercises a day. The nice thing about it, and it was really nice for a small boy who'd lost a lot of his confidence, was that you'd be given an exercise that would be hard in the first week, but by week 2 it was getting easier, and by week 6 they were just so beautiful, and you know, and that was a real confidence booster. The first change that we saw once he'd started the exercises was really the increase in self-confidence. And then the next thing that came after that was suddenly he was organising his day. So he would get up, he would get dressed, he would comb his hair, he'd check his bag, and this was before breakfast. Hoani's academics, as I said, he started the program well behind where he was supposed to be. He was retested 8 months into the program and his reading age had gone up by 16 months, his spelling age by 19 months, his writing by 14 months and his maths had gone up by 2 years. Hoani's teacher in this last year has commented that it was like a year of two halves. She had a different boy in the second half of the year to in the first half of the year. She actually said Hoani's extra lesson and listening program work have facilitated him in being able to hear better and process information with greater accuracy. It is a joy to behold Hoani sitting squarely in his seat, listening and integrating the information and instructions and diligently producing the appropriate work. Overall, Hoani's self-confidence has taken a huge lift. He's back to where I would say he was when he was a small boy, when he just knew the world was his oyster. You know, he knows he can achieve it, he carries himself differently, he's so much more upright, he looks you in the eye. The barriers that were holding him back from achieving are being transformed into something that lets him get to his potential. Yes, after seeing the changes in Hoani, with his extra lesson experience, I would really wholeheartedly recommend that people at least consider the possibility of looking a bit out of the square and trying it. The extra lesson process has just given him so much more confidence in himself, and the academic results are quite stunning, really.